My sister moved into my house while I was overseas, then she tried to prove it was hers. The first thing I saw when I came home was my sister's name on my mailbox. Not my name. Hers. Jessica Morgan, printed on a little white label underneath the brass numbers of my house. I stood at the end of my driveway with my suitcase beside me, staring at it. For a few seconds, I honestly thought I was at the wrong house. Same red brick. Same white garage door. Same oak tree leaning slightly over the sidewalk. Same porch light I had left on before flying to Spain. But there was my sister's name. Jessica. I looked at the house number. 417. My house. I had owned it for 6 years. Paid the mortgage. Paid the property taxes. Replaced the roof. Fixed the plumbing. Painted the kitchen. And now my sister's name was sitting on my mailbox like she had always lived there. I called her. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then I noticed something else. There was a welcome mat on my porch. It said, "Home sweet home, Jess." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes your brain laughs when reality is too ridiculous to process. I dragged my suitcase up the driveway. My key still worked. I opened the front door and stopped. My living room wasn't my living room anymore. There were family photographs on the walls. Jessica's photographs, her wedding picture, a picture of her dog, a framed photograph of our mother. My gray couch had been moved against another wall. My television was mounted higher. The bookshelf I had built myself was gone. In its place was a white cabinet I had never seen. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. "Jess?" A woman's voice answered. "Who is it?" I froze. It wasn't my sister. It was my mother. And suddenly, the entire 6 months I had spent overseas made sense. Not all of it. Not yet. But enough to know that whatever happened while I was gone, my family had decided my house no longer belonged to me. And they had apparently forgotten one very important detail. I had never given it to them. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 35 years old. I work as a project manager for a construction company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I bought my house when I was 29. It wasn't my dream house, at first. It was a 3-bedroom brick colonial in an older neighborhood with tall trees, narrow sidewalks, and houses close enough together that you knew when your neighbor bought a new lawnmower. The kitchen was outdated. The upstairs bathroom had pink tile. The basement smelled faintly like wet cardboard. But it was mine. Every dollar I put into it was mine. Every repair, every improvement, every late mortgage payment I made after working overtime, mine. The house had become important to me because of something that happened years before. My father died when I was 27. He left almost nothing behind. A few tools, his old watch, a fishing boat that barely ran, and a small handwritten note. It said, "Don't spend your whole life renting space in other people's expectations." My father had always been practical. He wasn't good at emotional speeches. That was probably the closest thing I ever got to one. 2 years later, I bought the house. I remember standing in the empty living room with the keys in my hand. I called my mother. "I'm a homeowner." She laughed. "I'm proud of you." Then she said something I remembered for years. "You've always been the one who could take care of yourself." I didn't know then that those words would eventually become the excuse my family used to take advantage of me. My younger sister Jessica was 31. She had always been different from me. Where I planned everything, she improvised. Where I saved, she spent. Where I worried about tomorrow, she believed tomorrow would work itself out. She wasn't a bad person. That made everything harder. Jessica was charming. People liked her. She could walk into a room where she knew nobody and leave 20 minutes later knowing everybody's birthday. She had worked in event planning for several years. Then she got married. Then divorced. Then engaged again. Then unemployed. Then employed. Then unemployed again. Her life moved in chapters. And every chapter somehow became a family emergency. My mother adored her. She called Jessica sensitive. She called me strong. Those 2 words followed us our entire lives. Sensitive, strong. If Jessica cried, people rushed toward her. If I cried, people assumed I would recover. I learned not to cry. Jessica learned that crying worked. Neither of us understood the damage that would cause. 6 months before I left for Spain, my company offered me a temporary overseas assignment. 6 months in Madrid. It was a big opportunity. I almost turned it down because I had a dog, a house, and a life in Charlotte. Then my boss said, "Claire, you're ready for this." So, I went. I hired a property manager. I arranged for a neighbor to check on the house. I put my furniture into storage, except for what I needed. And because I didn't want to leave the house completely empty, I let a friend of mine stay there occasionally. Everything was documented. Everything was insured. Everything was fine. Or so I thought. The first strange thing happened 2 months into my trip. My property manager emailed me. Subject: occupancy question. She asked whether I had authorized someone to stay in the house. I replied immediately, no. She said she had noticed lights on. I told her my neighbor might have been checking the property. She said, not the neighbor. I called her. Who did you see? She hesitated. Your sister. My stomach dropped. Jessica? Yes. Why? I don't know. Did she tell you she was staying there? No. Did you let her in? No. I sat at my hotel desk in Madrid, staring at the email. Then I called Jessica. She didn't answer. I called my mother. She answered immediately. Hi, honey. Is Jessica staying at my house? Silence. Then, why are you asking? Because my property manager saw her. My mother's tone changed. Claire, your sister is having a difficult time. That doesn't answer my question. She needed somewhere to stay. Mom, she'll only be there temporarily. I closed my eyes. How long? A few weeks. Did she move in? No. Mom, she has some things there. How many things? Claire, how many? She sighed. Not that much. I didn't believe her. I called Jessica again. No answer. I sent a text. You need to call me. She responded 6 hours later. We're sisters. Why are you making this a big deal? I stared at the message. I typed, because it's my house. She responded, I know. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just, I know. I called my property manager the next morning. She told me Jessica had been staying there for almost 3 weeks. 3 weeks? That's what I understand. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I thought you knew. No. She paused. Claire, there are people coming and going. Your mother has been there, your sister, a man I don't recognize. What man? I don't know. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Did anyone change the locks? I don't think so. Can you check? She said she'd send someone. 2 hours later, she called. Your locks have been changed. I stared at the phone. Are you sure? Yes. Who authorized it? No one. I felt my face go cold. I had a house. Someone was living there. The locks had been changed. And I was 6,000 miles away. I flew home 3 days later. I told my boss it was a family emergency. He didn't ask questions. When I arrived at the house, I expected Jessica to panic. Instead, she looked completely calm. She opened the door. She was wearing my old gray sweatshirt, the one I'd left in the closet. Claire, I stared at her. You changed the locks. We had to. We? She stepped aside. Mom was sitting in my living room. Dad wasn't there. He had died years earlier. I still looked for him whenever things got bad. Old habits. Mom stood up. You're home. Why did you change my locks? Jessica sighed. Because we were worried about you. I laughed. Worried about me? Yes. Enough to change my locks? Mom stepped forward. Claire, let's calm down. No. I looked around. My furniture, my photographs, my kitchen, my house, and my family standing inside it as if I were the guest. Get out. Jessica stared at me. What? Both of you. Mom looked hurt. Claire, leave. Jessica crossed her arms. You can't just throw us out. I stared at her. Watch me. She smiled, not nervously, confidently. That was when I knew. She believed she had a right to be there. What exactly do you think gives you the right to live here? Jessica looked at Mom. Then, back at me. Mom said you agreed. I didn't. She said you did. Then ask her. Mom stepped between us. Claire, you were overwhelmed. With what? Work. I was working in Spain. Exactly. So? You told us before you left that you didn't know how long you'd be gone. I said 6 months. You were under a lot of stress. I was fine. Jessica interrupted. You're not being fair. I looked at her. Fair? Yes. This is my house. She took a breath, then said, actually, it's complicated. That word, complicated. It is one of the most dangerous words in a family dispute, because people use it when the truth is simple, but inconvenient. I looked at my mother. What did you tell her? Mom didn't answer. Jessica said, Mom told me you were thinking about selling the house. I stared at her. I wasn't. She said you didn't want to come back. I never said that. She said you were thinking about staying overseas. I wasn't. She said you wanted someone to take care of the property. I hired a property manager. Jessica looked frustrated. Well, she thought you needed family. I shook my head. That's not permission. Then Jessica said something that changed the conversation completely. You gave Mom power of attorney. I froze. What? Mom looked at me. Jessica continued. You signed it before you left. I looked at my mother. Did I? She said nothing. And suddenly, I remembered. 3 months before Spain, my mother had asked me to sign several documents. She said they were for my father's estate. There had been some paperwork involving an old storage unit. I had signed them. I had trusted her. I had never imagined that one of those papers might have anything to do with my house. But now I remembered something. A thick document. A signature page. My mother's name. My name. I had barely read it. I assumed it was administrative. My mother looked at me. You signed it. What did I sign? A power of attorney. For what? General matters. General matters? Yes. Does it give you authority over my property? She didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen. My laptop was still in the house. I opened it. I searched my email. Nothing. I searched my cloud storage. Nothing. I called my attorney. He didn't answer. It was Sunday. I called again. No answer. Then Jessica said, You should sit down. I turned around. Why? Because there's more. She handed me a folder. I didn't touch it. What is that? Documents. What documents? House documents. I looked at my mother. She said, Just read them. I opened the folder. The first page was a copy of my deed. My name was there. So was the property address. Nothing unusual. Then, I saw another document. A lease. My house had supposedly been leased to Jessica for 1 year. Starting 4 months earlier. 4 months. I looked at the signature. My name was at the bottom. But I hadn't signed it. I knew my own signature. This wasn't mine. It was close. Very close. But wrong. The loop on the C was too large. The final stroke was too long. My signature ended upward. This one ended flat. I looked at my mother. Who signed this? She didn't answer. Jessica said, Mom handled it. I looked at her. You knew? I thought you agreed. To this? Yes? I was in Spain. You could still agree. I didn't. She shrugged. Then I guess we misunderstood. I looked at the lease again. It had been notarized. That made no sense. I turned the page. There was a property management authorization, another signature, another document, and then something that made my stomach turn. A document titled, Transfer of Beneficial Interest. I read the first paragraph, then the second. Then I stopped. The document claimed that I had transferred my beneficial interest in the property to my mother. I looked up. Mom. She didn't speak. Did you do this? She whispered. You're making this bigger than it is. I put the document down. No. I pointed at it. This is fraud. Jessica stood. Don't say that. Why? Because Mom was trying to protect the house. From what? You. I laughed. I wasn't even in the country. You were talking about selling. I wasn't. Mom said, you weren't thinking clearly. I stared at her. Who told you that? She didn't answer. And that's when I realized the most frightening possibility. They weren't trying to convince me. They were trying to convince everyone else. I called my attorney. This time he answered. His name was Michael Reynolds. Claire? Michael, I need help. What happened? My mother is living in my house. What? My sister too. He went silent. Did you authorize that? No. Did you sign a power of attorney? I signed something. What? I don't know. Find it. I'm trying. Don't confront anyone until we know what was signed. It's too late. What do you mean? They already have a lease. Silence. Claire, send me everything. I photographed every page. He told me to leave the house. I refused. I own it. I know. Then why should I leave? Because if they're claiming legal occupancy, you don't want this turning into a physical confrontation. I looked at Jessica. She was watching me. I said, fine. I packed a small bag. Before I left, I looked around my living room. My house, my father's old fishing photograph, my mother's wedding picture, my childhood photo, and I suddenly understood why they had put the family pictures on my walls. They weren't decorating. They were establishing a story. A story in which this house belonged to the family, not me. I stayed in a hotel. Michael called me at 8 the next morning. I found the document. What document? The power of attorney. My stomach tightened. What does it say? It's limited. Limited how? It gives your mother authority to handle specific estate matters. Does it mention the house? No. Does it authorize selling property? No. Does it authorize transferring property? No. I exhaled. Then why are they claiming it does? Because they may have created something else. What? I don't know yet. He asked me to come to his office. I arrived at 9. He had copies of my documents spread across his conference table. He pointed to the supposed transfer. This is not valid. Why? Several reasons. He showed me. The power of attorney didn't authorize this transfer. The signature didn't match. The notary information was inconsistent. The property transfer hadn't been properly recorded. And most importantly, the deed was still in my name. So they don't own it. Correct. Can I remove them? Not immediately. Why? Because your sister has established residency. I stared at him. She moved into my house while I was overseas. I know. She forged my signature. We need to prove that. I leaned back. How? Records. What records? Everything. He looked at me. Phone records, emails, bank statements, travel records, security footage, utility bills, insurance records. Anything showing where you were and what you did. I understood. Build the timeline. The same way I built construction schedules. One event at a time. One document at a time. No emotion. Just facts. The first thing we found was the lease. It was dated July 12th. I was in Madrid. I had a boarding pass proving I was in Spain that day. Then we found the notary. A woman named Patricia Lane. Michael contacted her. She said she had notarized the document. I was confused. Did she see me? No. Then how could she notarize my signature? Michael looked at me. She said your mother presented a copy of your identification. My stomach dropped. My driver's license. Probably. I had given my mother a copy of my driver's license months earlier. For the estate paperwork, she had used it. My identity. My signature. My house. She had assembled an entire story. And for the first time, I felt afraid. Not angry. Afraid. Because this wasn't a family misunderstanding anymore. Someone had deliberately created legal-looking documents to take control of my home. Then came the HOA. My neighborhood had a small homeowners association. Nothing dramatic. Annual meetings. lawn rules, trash schedules. The president, a retired accountant named Frank, called me. Claire? Yes. I've been meaning to contact you. About what? Your ownership change. I sat down. What ownership change? We received paperwork. When? About 4 months ago. What paperwork? A notice that your mother was taking over the property. Did you verify it? Your mother's name was on the authorization. I closed my eyes. Frank, I'm still the owner. He sounded embarrassed. Well, I didn't know. Do you still have the documents? Yes. Please preserve them. Why? I'm disputing them. He paused. Claire, I'm sorry. It's not your fault. But it was another piece, another document, another person who had seen the story my mother was building. The utility company gave us another surprise. The electricity account had been changed. The water account too. Jessica had put everything in her name. Why? Because it created evidence of residency. Her name appeared on bills. Her name appeared on mail. Her name appeared on the HOA records. Her name appeared on the lease. She had even registered her dog at the address. It looked like she had lived there for years, except she hadn't. She had been living in a rented apartment when I left. And we had the lease. Then, I found something else. A package delivery. A large furniture order. The delivery date was July 10th, 2 days before the fake lease. The delivery address was my house. Jessica had moved furniture in before the paperwork existed, which meant the plan had started earlier. I called Michael. We need her timeline. Agreed. We discovered that my mother had visited a real estate attorney 2 months before I left for Spain. That appointment was buried in her calendar. I didn't know how we found it. My mother had accidentally forwarded an old email to me months earlier. I had never deleted it. The email confirmed the appointment. The subject line said, Property Planning Consultation. I stared at it. My mother had planned this before I left. Maybe before she even knew whether I was going to Spain. I forwarded it to Michael. He replied, Keep everything. Don't contact her. So, I didn't. Then Jessica made a mistake. She posted a photograph on Instagram. It was a picture of my living room. Caption, Finally home. One of her friends commented, Love the new place. Jessica replied, Thanks, took some work but it's ours now. I saved the screenshot. Michael loved it. Not emotionally. Legally. This is useful. Why? Because she's admitting possession. She says ours. Exactly. Then she posted another picture. A week later. A key. Caption, New chapter. I stared at it. The key was my old spare key. The one I kept in a drawer. The one I had never given her. The police initially treated the matter as a civil dispute. That was frustrating. I wanted someone to walk into my house and arrest somebody. Real life doesn't work like that. Michael explained. You need to prove intent. How? Show that they knew you hadn't authorized it. We had the messages. My sister had texted me before the move. We're sisters. Why are you making this a big deal? Then another message. Mom said you wouldn't mind. That was useful, but not enough. Then I found the email. It was from Jessica, to my mother. Sent 3 days after I arrived in Spain. The subject line, What if she comes back? The body said, Mom, I'm nervous about the house. What if Claire gets home early? My mother replied, She won't. Then, by the time she comes back, she'll understand that this is for the best. I stared at the screen. That sentence changed everything. They knew. They knew I hadn't agreed. They knew I might come home. And they believed they could make the house theirs before I returned. The next step was the hardest. I had to go back to the house, not to fight, to collect my belongings. The police came with me. My mother opened the door. She looked exhausted. Jessica stood behind her. Neither spoke. The officer explained why we were there. I walked inside. The house smelled like Jessica's candles. Coconut. Vanilla. Something sweet. I walked upstairs. My bedroom had become a guest room. My clothes were packed into boxes. My photographs were gone. My father's watch was missing. I turned to Jessica. Where is my father's watch? I don't know. You moved my things. I put them somewhere safe. Where? I don't remember. The officer asked her to locate it. She did. It was in a drawer downstairs. I picked it up. Then, I found something else. A box of my father's papers. Inside was the original deed. The deed to my house. My father had helped me buy it. He had been there when I signed the mortgage. And there was his handwriting on a sticky note attached to the folder. Claire, keep this safe. It's yours. I sat on the floor. For the first time in months, I cried. Not because my family had invaded my house. Because my father had been right. I had spent my whole life renting space in other people's expectations. And now they were trying to take the one place that was actually mine. The legal process moved quickly after that. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged lease, the fake transfer, the invalid power of attorney, the altered signatures, the emails, the social media posts, the utility records, the HOA records, the property manager's testimony, the travel records proving I was overseas, and finally, the notary admitted that she had never seen me. She had relied on the identification presented by my mother. That was the piece prosecutors needed. The case became criminal. My mother was charged. Jessica was questioned. And suddenly, the confidence disappeared. The people who had told me I was being dramatic now wanted to negotiate. My mother asked to meet. I agreed. Not because I wanted to forgive her, because I wanted to hear the truth. We met at a small restaurant near downtown. My mother looked older, much older. She sat across from me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, I never meant to hurt you. I looked at her. Then why did you do it? She cried. Jessica needed somewhere to live. She could have rented a house. She couldn't afford it. That's not my fault. I know. Then why my house? She looked down. Because you had it. I waited. She continued. You were gone. I almost laughed. Exactly. You were doing so well. So you decided I wouldn't care. I thought you would understand. Understand what? That family should help family. I shook my head. Mom, you didn't ask me for help. I was afraid you'd say no. There it was, the entire truth. She didn't make the decision because she knew I would agree. She made it because she knew I wouldn't. I asked the question I had been carrying for months. Did you plan to give Jessica the house permanently? She didn't answer. Mom, she whispered. Yes. My chest tightened. Why? She needed stability. I needed stability too. You had a career. So? You could buy another house. I stared at her. That sentence hurt more than the rest, because it told me what she thought my success meant. It meant I could lose more. It meant I could survive more. It meant my losses didn't count. I said, You didn't protect Jessica. She looked up. What? You taught her that she was entitled to whatever somebody else built. She began crying. And you taught me that I had to give it to her. She covered her face. I stood. I don't hate you. She looked at me. But I don't trust you. That hurt her. I could see it. But for once, I didn't soften it. Jessica eventually apologized too. Her apology was different. She didn't say she needed the house. She didn't say Mom told her. She said, I was jealous. I hadn't expected that. Of what? Everything. She laughed bitterly. You had the career, the house, the money, the stable life. I thought you were happy. I wasn't. She looked at the table. Mom always said you were strong. I said nothing. And every time I failed, she told me you were lucky. I stared at her. She never told me that. I know. She wiped her eyes. That's why I hated you sometimes. That sentence hurt, but it was honest. I didn't know. I know. She looked at me. I'm sorry. I believed her. Not because everything was fixed. Because for the first time, someone in my family was telling me the truth without asking me to sacrifice anything in return. My mother eventually accepted a plea agreement. She received probation, restitution, and community service. The charges related to the fraudulent property documents were serious. She avoided prison because she had no prior criminal record, and because nobody was physically harmed. But she lost something she couldn't replace: my trust. Jessica moved out. She rented a small apartment across town. She got a job at a wedding venue. She started paying her own bills. And for the first time, she stopped calling Mom whenever something went wrong. That wasn't my victory. It was hers. I moved back into my house. The first thing I did was remove every photograph my family had put on the walls. Not because I hated them, because I wanted my walls back. I repainted the living room. I changed the locks. I replaced the mailbox. I planted flowers along the walkway. I put my father's fishing photograph above the fireplace. Then I bought a new welcome mat. It said, "Welcome home." Nothing else. No name. No family slogan. Just those 2 words. Because after everything that happened, I finally understood something. Home isn't the place where your family tells you that you belong. Home is the place where you don't have to prove that you do. 6 months later, I went to Spain again, this time for vacation. I stood in Madrid on a warm evening, drinking coffee outside a little restaurant. My phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "Mom says she's sorry." I smiled. I typed, "I know." She replied, "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" I thought about it. Then I wrote, "Maybe." She asked, "Do you forgive me?" I answered, "I'm working on it." Then I put my phone away. Because forgiveness isn't a door you open because someone knocks. Sometimes it's a road, and sometimes you have to walk it alone. A year after I returned home, I received a letter from my mother. She didn't ask for anything. That was new. She wrote, "I spent most of my life believing that protecting your family meant preventing them from experiencing consequences. I thought if I could fix everything for Jessica, she'd become confident. Instead, I taught her to depend on other people. And I thought because you were strong, you didn't need protection. I was wrong." Then came the sentence I had waited my whole life to hear. "You should never have had to be strong for everyone." I put the letter down. I cried. Not because it erased what happened. It didn't. But because sometimes people finally understand the damage they caused after you stop protecting them from it. Today, I still live in the same house. 417. Same red brick. Same oak tree. Same white garage. But everything else feels different. The house is mine. Not because a deed says so. Not because a court confirmed it. Not because my mother finally admitted it. It's mine because I finally stopped asking my family for permission to own my own life. I still talk to Jessica. We aren't best friends. We don't pretend nothing happened. But we're sisters. Real sisters now. The kind who can say no. The kind who can disagree. The kind who don't need one person to lose so the other can win. My mother and I speak occasionally. Some conversations last 5 minutes. Some last an hour. Some end awkwardly. We're still figuring it out. Maybe we always will. But one thing has changed. She no longer calls me when Jessica needs money. She calls Jessica, and Jessica answers. That might be the most important consequence of everything that happened. Not the lawsuit, not the police report, not the forged documents, not even getting my house back. It was watching my sister finally stand on her own feet. I used to think my house was just a property. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a garage, a mortgage. Now I know it was something else. It was proof that I could build a life without waiting for somebody else to approve it. My father once wrote, "Don't spend your whole life renting space in other people's expectations." I thought he meant strangers. He didn't. Sometimes the hardest expectations to escape belong to the people who love you. The people who know exactly which words will make you feel guilty. The people who know your childhood weaknesses. The people who can say family and make you question yourself. But family is not ownership. Love is not permission. And helping someone does not mean handing them the keys to everything you've built. My sister moved into my house while I was overseas. She changed the locks. She put her name on my mailbox. She hung her photographs on my walls. She even tried to create documents saying the house was hers. For a while, I thought the worst part was losing my home. I was wrong. The worst part was realizing that the people who did it believed they were entitled to it. And the best part? Getting the house back wasn't the real victory. The real victory was learning that I didn't have to become cruel to have boundaries. I didn't have to hate my mother. I didn't have to destroy my sister. I didn't have to take revenge. I just had to tell the truth. The house was mine. The signature wasn't mine. The documents weren't mine. The decision wasn't theirs. And my life? That was mine too. So if you're listening to this, and you're the person in your family everyone calls the responsible one, remember something I wish I'd understood sooner. Being responsible doesn't mean being responsible for everyone. Being successful doesn't mean you owe your success to people who refuse to build their own. And being family doesn't give someone the right to cross your boundaries. Read your documents. Know what you sign. Protect your property. Protect your finances. And most importantly, protect the part of yourself that still knows when something is wrong. Because sometimes the person standing on your porch saying, "Welcome home," is the same person who has been quietly trying to make sure you never get back inside. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't slam the door. It's simply unlock it. Walk through. And remember that it was yours all along.